Welcome, one and all, to the In Tune with Joon podcast. I'm your boy Joon. Today, we are going to be talking about sexual misconduct in the Smash community. This is one of the heavier topics that I'm going to be covering on this podcast. Definitely the heaviest up until now. And we are joined by some confident and valuable guests today. We're going to have an open discussion about what happened and what we want to happen in the future to mediate or rather mitigate this situation. So without further ado, let's go ahead and introduce our first guest. He's on cam right now. Derek. How you doing, Derek? Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you're involved with the Smash community.
How's it going, Kia? So I guess first started playing back in like 2011, 2012, and that was Brawl. My hometown actually didn't really have too many tournaments, but the ones they did, I would go to. And it was actually the first time I'd ever owned a Smash game, so I was like super on fire for Smash at the time. Because like I'd always wanted to play it, but I was like never really good. So the one who actually taught me how to play competitive Smash, even though it was Brawl, was there's a competitive Melee player back in the day, Pink Shinobi. So his little brother, obviously that whole entire family is like really big on games. So he's Pink Shinobi, if you don't know, he's the Peach player who got this Jungle Japes and Melee banned. because he would just hit the Ganon and then camp the very top platform, and Ganon can't get up there without like jump up B. So it was like, so people were getting like hella mad, but yeah, that's what Pink Shinobi stand for. But, that whole family just had like really good game stats, like really good at every game they played, like StarCraft and everything. So I was able to get like a really good perspective on like that was my first exposure to like competitive Smash. It was like my friend was like, "Oh yeah, go check out these YouTube videos of like Legan, all these other," because I like playing Link back then and Brawl, so I'd like Tempest and I'd like look these guys up. Then it transitioned to like All Is Brawl for a bit. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but that was like,
Of course.
yeah, I was on All Is Brawl for a while, and then I finally transferred to UCI, and that's around the time Smash 4 was coming out. And for me, it was like in terms of Smash, it was a bit of a culture shock in the sense of I actually would host tournaments at my apartment. A bunch of random people around who knows where would actually come. And this is before the Smash 4 club at UCI. This was like right when Smash Wii U came out. And the funny thing was like,
Okay.
I didn't realize like how big Smash was in SoCal at the time, because I just came from like my small town that like barely had any locals like ever. And I was like, and then eventually I realized, dude, like I don't even need to host these tournaments. Like there's literally a tournament going on, like, and like so. And then eventually, Evan, Evan and Faisal, they all started the Smash 4 UCI club, and yeah, I TO'd there for a bit, and then got Smash introduced to the Association of Gamers over at UCI, and then it evolved into what it is now, which I think Kia can speak more to with like later like the Smash 4 crews that like eventually ended up going toe to toe with the Buzz in grand finals, right?
Sure.
For collegiates and all that stuff, and yeah. So I've been to like quite a few tournaments. I TO'd for a bit, like smaller tournaments, and um, I would say that's my general experience these days. I'm mostly just playing casual with friends. I don't go to tournaments anymore. Just kind of doing my own thing, but still being with the people that I met through those events, and just hanging out.
Perfect. Thanks for sharing that, Derek. We're going to move on to our second guest. You might recognize him. I'd like to introduce you to Griffin. Go ahead, Griffin.
Hey, man. Thanks for having me. My tag is Captain Faceroll. For me, I guess number 17 in the world. That's probably what I'm most known for. But as far as like community involvement, I was the president of the UCI Melee Club at UC Irvine from 2014 to 2018. So the 4 years I was there. And even after graduating, still involved with sort of the SoCal scene as a community leader. So I'm one of the, I don't really TO anymore, but I'm still on like the PR panel, and I'm one of like the admins on the page. And we're actually working on sort of like a conduct panel of our own, because unfortunately, some of the allegations are related to SoCal as well. It's not just like an out there threat, you know, it's something that we kind of have to deal with in our own backyard too. So,
Right.
So those are sort of my accolades, player slash community leader, I guess. I started playing in 2013. I actually started with Project M in Chicago.
Sorry, what was that?
I started with Project M, actually.
No. Sorry, what was that?
Brawl mod may or may not be illegal. I'm not sure. But yeah, no, I started with Project M in Chicago, actually, because that's where I'm from. And then I played Melee at the same time, but I was mostly a PM player, believe it or not. But then once I transferred to UCI, the PM scene was like there, but not as big as the Melee one, because we had like a lot of really good Melee players for whatever reason. And so I sort of like transitioned. Like at first it was like mostly PM and then some Melee, but then it like slowly shifted, and then now I don't really play PM at all. But yeah, that was sort of my journey. Started in 2013, slightly before the doc, but I'm kind of considered a doc kid. One of like the more prominent ones, I guess. And yeah, that's me.
All right. Thank you so much for your introduction, Griffin. Thanks for being on. And let's move to our final guest, last but not least, Kevin. Tell us about yourself, Kevin.
Hey, I'm Kevin. The way I'm involved with the Smash community, I'm mostly just I guess I'm a casual, not really, but I'm definitely the least involved. I have been following the Smash scene since it started, basically, though. I was one of the kids who had the game in like 2002, but was too young to like travel and compete and stuff. But I always watched all the stuff on YouTube, you know, back when everything was on YouTube. Like you'd have to look up like Ken versus Bomb Soldier Game 1 and then be uploaded, and then you have to click on the next.
Ken versus Aniki, bro. Ken versus
Yeah,
Aniki,
exactly.
the Link player. Oh,
I've been following Smash forever. My first taste of competitive Smash was actually Brawl. I did play Melee before Brawl, but Brawl was much easier to like, you know, get down the tech. And my first tournament experience was actually in Union City. It was hosted by my friend Julius. His tag was It's Stoop Kid. I'm not sure if yeah. Anyway,
yeah.
But
Harold.
he invited he was able to get like a bunch of the top NorCal Brawl players at the time to like some random library. Like yeah, like
oh, that's right. Your friend group had DSS, right? NES player, the NorCal NES player.
Yeah, he went to my high school. Yeah.
DSS was like NorCal PR like 1 or 2. Smash 4.
Yeah, he was actually. Anyways,
we have a lot of love in the chat for Kevin. Banana, Zan Cow-X, ULI Gaming. Just wanted to say you have some fans, Kevin.
Oh yeah, I told them about the stream.
Awesome.
But yeah, more recently, I'm a Melee player. I did not compete as much, but I did. Most of my competitions were in SF. Shout outs to SFSU Smash. And yeah, other than that, I'm just like a random competitor. Not really any involvement in terms of like TOing or anything like that. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your introduction, Kevin, and thanks for being on this podcast.
I have to mention.
Yeah. You know that is definitely going to get you some accolades in Twitch chat. And I guess I'll briefly go over what my involvement was in the Smash community. I was an intern in 2017 for the Smash 4 at UCI club. I would help run events, bringing setups, helping run brackets sometimes. I became much more involved when I became the president in 2018. From then, one of my goals was to kind of harness our talent and show it off in the national level, like Melee did with the crew battle. And so, at the same time as running a weekly and one major, what would you call it? A major? What would you call Zotcade? A regional?
Yeah,
Let's
regional.
say.
Sure.
Okay, a regional. So ran a regional, ran a weekly tournament with you know. I don't know if you mentioned Griffin, but I feel like there weren't really quote unquote incidents at our locals. There was one guy who came on the first week, like literally my first tournament, and he threw his like controller at the wall and like dented the esports arena, and he was given a like stern talking to and a warning, and he never came back. So there was that, but other than that, I mean, it went pretty smoothly. Some people who are late, top player privilege, whatever, what have you.
Was it because he got bayoneted or something? What was it?
He
What
no
was
no
the
no.
reason why?
He was a Diddy Kong player, which is hilarious that he would complain about anything. But yeah, I think he played against Brian potentially, in tournament and got very upset at that. But I saw signs of like rage in friendlies even.
Oh, I see.
Anyway, the point of this talk is not about him. The point I wanted to get to was what Derek was suggesting with the crew battle. So we participated in the CSU, so Collegiate Star League, so CSL rather, Collegiate Star League Smash 4 crew battles. There were like 500 schools at first. We made top 128, then top 16, then top 4. We got flown out to Shine 2018. We competed. We got sent to losers bracket round 1. We fought our way to the top, and we nearly we reversed. What do you call it? How could I forget this term? Reset the bracket, right?
Against the
Reset the bracket against the Buzz's team, who was a professional player. I think top 5 at that point.
Shout outs to Jingen.
Shout outs to Jingen. I mean, shout outs to the whole crew. I mean, Giovanni, Jingen, Bran, T3. Everyone who helped out in the crew, Luna, myself, I guess. And it was one of the best experiences of my life, and I genuinely mean that. Like, it was such an exhilarating time. It felt like I had done something meaningful at UCI with esports, rather than just saying to my parents, "Hey, I ran a Smash club." It's like, "Hey, we went and competed and got like second place against a lot of top schools," and that was really something I could point to and say, "Hey, we did this." And yeah, I was proud of it, and I was happy with where UCI went, and they, as far as I know, upheld that legacy. They got second place again the following season under the leadership of Muskrat, I believe.
I didn't know that.
And yeah, they got second place again, and I'm not sure about this season. It's probably been canceled because of COVID, but it was fantastic, and I loved my time at Smash at UCI. So, with all that being said, I think the audience should have a decent idea of who we are. And honestly, the topic today, hopefully, is not about us. We want to talk about kind of what went on in the Smash scene at large. And I want to briefly touch on sort of the way I did, right? When I said, okay, well, there was just one person who caused issues. What issues did you see that may or may not have been related to sexual misconduct in the Smash community in your time in the community? And whoever has something to say can go ahead and just say first.
You're talking about our personal experiences in like seeing these things?
Something you saw, something that you know of. Like, was there any evidence of this in your mind prior to the news breaking on Twitter? That's kind of what I'm getting at.
Well, some of the
I see.
I'll just go first, I guess. One of the things you kind of have to keep in mind with a lot of the more heinous things that have come to light is they're not necessarily in public, but there are a lot of sort of patterns of things that you can point to that were public. So a lot of these players, like for example, like DJ Nintendo or something in the Melee scene. Most of what I'm going to be talking about is going to be Melee because I'm more involved with that.
Sure.
But there are a lot of instances of players, like talking to underage girls and like grooming them and like sending them very inappropriate messages that are not okay. for someone who's underage and when you're a full-blown adult. But a lot of these things, like, if it's like a messenger conversation, you're not going to see that at a tournament. Like if you talk to those people like in person, you're not really going to see something like that. But you are going to see representations of their behavior elsewhere. And unfortunately, what's been happening with a lot of these people is these allegations will come out, and the response for a lot of these players, unfortunately, is not, oh wow, that person, I never knew that they were like that. A lot of the time it's like, yeah, we kind of knew they were weird, like they've always been a little sus, but we didn't know that they were like that bad. Which is really unfortunate, because that just means like the signs were kind of there, but they weren't really taken seriously. In my personal example, there's a player from Irvine, actually, Mac D, who was always someone that was sort of like kind of given a pass, because that's just like sort of how he was. So for those unfamiliar, he's very like, he does a lot of like physical contact. So he'll like hug you, or he'll like hold your arm or stuff like that. And keep in mind, Mac D is very tall. Like, I'm 6 foot and he's taller than me for sure. I don't know exactly, maybe 6'3", maybe 6'4", I don't know. So very, very physically overpowering. And he would do stuff like that all the time, or he would just like kind of say weird comments about you. And he was always kind of given a pass because that's just kind of how he was. Like, he's just kind of flirty, he's just kind of like, he just has a lot of physical contact. Sure. And looking back on it, that was just sort of like how, that those were just like the excuses given for him, because that's just like how he was as a person, right? And so unfortunately, it's like those behaviors are the ones that were publicized. So you would see that at a tournament and you're like, yeah, that person's kind of uncomfortable, but like, I don't know, you just have to like avoid him, and then you'll like, the situation will be solved. But then you realize that there's more instances of things that are not publicized, where McCain is doing this to underage boys as well, and things like asking them for like kisses and stuff, like very, very weird things that go beyond sort of the public stuff. Like, even for me, I was overage, but McCain would very oftentimes like hug me and kind of not let go, even though I would like tell him to. Stuff that's like made me very uncomfortable, but didn't really feel like anything that I should like report. But looking back on it, makes me feel really bad, because like obviously that was representative of like something that if that had been addressed, maybe the worst things that he did maybe could have been curbed. At that point in time, I think he had already done stuff, so it was probably too late. But basically what I was trying to say is like, a lot of the stuff that you'd see, like the like worst of the worst things that these people have done aren't always in public, but you can sort of see like small hints of what they've been doing or how they've been acting in public. And I think sort of like the smaller public things should be taken care of. Like, we should do a better job of taking care of those smaller things, because hopefully it will prevent them from doing like bigger things, but also like it'll just help curb the behavior overall. So
Safe State donated $15.
Like I said, I haven't really
Rain.
seen like the worst of it, but I don't really know if you can, because most of it's not going to be happening at the tournament venue straight up, like, in the floor.
I think another thing we have to consider too is like, Ash is largely like a grassroots community, and like rules and regulation, all these other things like are fairly foreign, I would say, when it comes to like this community. Like, the thing about Smash like blowing up and being as big as it was, if you think about it, that didn't actually happen like until like fairly recently, like maybe the last like maybe 6 or 7 years or something,
Yeah.
if that even, so I think Ash went from like a grassroots community, and it kind of blew up so fast that like no, it weren't enough like regulations in place, if that makes sense. Like, it didn't help that Nintendo didn't support the community, For example, you have Capcom Cup, who literally enforces like, if you're like a minor, you have to have a parent or guardian with you at these Capcom Cup events. If Nintendo had run the event, they probably would have enforced something like that as well. So I think it's like, because Smash was largely left to I guess the culture kind of remained intact from this grassroots community. You know what I'm saying? So I feel like in that sense, it's like you watch the Smash documentary, right? And then you go to this event and you get hella hyped and you feel safe because all these people love Smash just like you, right? Let's say you're like a teenager, right? And you go here, you're probably not expecting like, this something-year-old guy to like come over and like, yeah, he'll talk to you, but you're probably not thinking anything of it, And it's kind of tragic, that these predators, it's literally like perfect, I guess like hunting ground, if you want to call it that, it's sad that they kind of take advantage of that homely environment, and
It is sad.
Yeah, there's a big problem kind of with like the Smash culture being like, it's not said with bad intentions, but a lot of times people will be like, "Oh, you play Smash? Like we're automatically friends." Like people always talk about like, "Oh, Smash is so great."
That's interesting.
Because it bridges all these like age gaps, these, like class gaps, these race gaps. Like it doesn't like, I'm a 14-year-old kid from Chicago and you're a 22-year-old dude from California, but like we both play Melee. That's sick. Wow, like we can be friends and we can hang out. And I don't. The intention there isn't bad, but it just sort of it willfully ignores the like legitimate differences between like power dynamics, especially with like age or gender.
Yeah.
And part of that is kind of what Derek's been talking about with like, since it's a grassroots thing, like it's really up to us to make that stuff not happen. But like a lot of people, especially kids, will kind of not like when you're younger, you don't really think that like you're less mature. You don't think that you have like less power in a relationship like that. So but when you're adult, as you get older, you're like, oh my god, 14 years old, like that's so young. They're literally a child. Like when you were 14 yourself, you might have thought like, oh, I'm mature for my age, or I'm an adult too, like how come no one respects or listens to what I have to say. But so it's like it's really up to the adults to make responsible decisions and be like, okay, like,
absolutely.
For example, we're at a Smash Fest, like, okay, I'm not gonna have alcohol with like this 14-year-old kid. Like even though I like smoke weed every day, probably shouldn't have it out when I'm playing this kid. And like,
absolutely.
And it sounds weird to an outsider because it is like it is not normal for an adult to have a 14-year-old at your house playing Smash. But like for Melee, especially back then, that was super common. Like way before like NetPlay or whatever. Like there's a lot of stories of like kids who start when they're sometimes preteens or teenagers, and like if they want to play, they have to go to someone's house.
Agree. And actually, to be honest, like when I was having those like Smash 4 like beginner like before weeklies at UCI at my apartment, we did have like underage kids there whose like parents dropped them off there, like literally dropped them off my apartment, and I'm like, hi guys, event's like over, like you guys gotta dip, like
like, don't you guys have families?
And it's like it's not like it's really your fault for like allowing that. Like you just want to hope that by allowing them there, you're like making a more inclusive community, and like we're just like friends, and you can and Smash like provides an escape for a lot of people, and so you want to be like, okay, well maybe like your home life isn't that good or whatever, but like Smash provides you with like friends, and like they're older than you. How cool is that? Like, isn't that cool? You're like friends with all these like kind of like pseudo adults and whatever, but it's just like really on like the adults in the community to make sure that like be like, okay, like we're not going to smoke or drink at the Smash Fest because we have young kids there. Like, sorry guys, like like simple stuff like that just changes the culture. Like, I don't know, it's just weird.
And I wanted to spin off of that, and I'd like to amplify your message first by saying that the impetus is absolutely on the adults, the people who are not minors, to lead the way. Just because, let's say, a minor is, idolizing you and, wants to follow you around and wants to be your friend because, oh, maybe they heard about you on this forum or on this video or on this Twitch channel or whatever, it's up to you to define the relationship. And you're able to say, like, I appreciate you, that you're my fan. Let's play some friendlies and let's leave it at that. And then if you are going to, let's say you want to drink, let's say you want to smoke, let's not do it in front of the minors. Let's be responsible with what actions we choose to do in front of minors, what we choose to say, I'm not trying to say go ahead and censor yourself in front of minors. Obviously, they're exposed to some things. Like if you say crap, I don't think you should be like covering your mouth and like apologizing profusely. But at the same time, you don't want to set a bad example for them. So I agree with a lot of what you've said, Griffin, and I think it's so important to keep hammering the fact that just because, let's say, a minor thinks it's cool, like, you don't know what their background is. Maybe, like you said, they have family issues and they're looking for any escape that they can. So anyone who's friendly with them, like that's their escape, and they can't make friends at school, let's say. And it's up to you to be cognizant enough to at least recognize that it's possible. You don't have to be on red alert every time anyone comes up to you and be like, all right, let me see your ID, like, what's your family background? Are you okay? Are you well adjusted? Like, no, that's not the solution here. But I think it's important to be conscientious of it, be aware that there's a power dynamic, because I frankly still think that some of those who have been accused are not aware of this power dynamic. And I think that education is crucial in reforming the prominent members in our scene. And I would consider you a prominent member of the Melee scene, Griffin, and I'm so happy to see that you have this mindset and you're aware of some of the possible issues with having people who are underage at tournaments. So yeah, I'm really happy with what's being said here.
So like on the subject of like social power dynamics, like it's not even the case of being an adult and a minor either, right? Like just someone who has a higher standing and they're kind of using that, right? Like if you
I
watch
was going to get to that, yeah.
like the Hungry Box video, right, where he talked like he legally didn't do anything wrong, right? But obviously morally, and he even admits it, right? Like he was abusing, like everyone knows, like if you have any contact with the Smash community, everyone knows there's top player privilege, and like the Smash community raises its top players, like treats them as like fucking gods, you know what I'm saying? Like
Sure.
Yeah, Melee literally referred to them as gods.
They are literally called gods. Like, what more example do you need?
So I think like in that example, right, where Hungry Box even admitted I would abuse my status as like a top player, to try and like girls' numbers or whatever, you know what I'm saying? And that ultimately led to him, fortunately, like cheating on the significant other, right? So I think the question is, if we were going to talk about like reform, right? Like, I think moral, if it's like a legal standpoint, like the kids and stuff, like it's actually a lot you can do there, right? But if it's like morally, from a moral standpoint, I think it's just you can't have any, I guess, official rules. Like nothing's stopping them from actually doing that. But I think as a community, you can like, if you go to a tournament and you see that, you can call that person out, right, and be like, hey, bro, like, talking to that girl, or like if you catch them, like, I guess abusing their power, I guess like accountability and on the more local level, I think is more important. But also society is like, I feel like most of society wouldn't call out their friends if they're doing something bad, unfortunately.
That's fair. And
but I think
before
it's a standard
we
they need
yeah,
to,
go ahead.
they need to hold themselves to, especially if
Yeah.
if you want Smash to grow, because right now it's like really Smash's lowest point. For a lot of reasons, like Nintendo probably, any steps they were taking towards supporting Kevin Smash have probably just like, that progress probably just erased.
I'm sure. Yeah, they may have backtracked their steps. They made a statement. I don't know if you guys saw that.
Did see that, yeah.
They obviously, yeah. So they spoke out against it, of course.
Said like,
And
we stand with the victims, which is good. That's what you're supposed to do, right?
Yeah, I think so. And for all those people who are wondering, why isn't Nintendo more involved? Well, now I bet they're happy they're not involved. And Leffen said something interesting. He said this is not a bad week for Smash. This is a good week.
I agree.
And I think that the message is positive, and I think that that's what we need right now. In that right now, Smash Bros is not the NBA. It's not on national television. It's not a worldwide phenomenon. It's not in the public zeitgeist. So we can be happy that this is contained while it's relatively not in the mainstream sphere. And I didn't mean to use the word contained. I meant to use the word, let's say, like, this has come out against people who are prominent in the Smash scene, not so much contained, because that makes it seem like a cover up, and this is not a cover up. This should be a reformation of the Smash community, and we should be trying to learn from other institutions that deal with, okay, well, if you're playing basketball, well, kids like basketball and adults like basketball. How do they deal with that? Okay, there are leagues, there are age divisions. Okay, well, maybe Smash Bros isn't there yet, but we can take some ideas. I've heard people say, and I know maybe we're talking about solutions too early, but that's kind of where my mind has gone. People have said, let's make tournaments 18 plus. Let's have chaperones. Let's have signed consent forms, and each have their pros and cons. But I think that the fact that we're having this discussion, it means a lot. And we weren't having this discussion in a large scale before, even though, I've heard some TO speak out that they have. I think it's important that now the community is cognizant of it. And frankly, one of the most the thing that shocked me the most is looking at the Reddit mega thread and just scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. Like, it's not one bad apple, This is a widespread issue. So you can call it systemic, and that means that it needs to be dealt with on a systemic level. There needs to be, like, we talk about, like, the quirks of Smash Ultimate. Oh, haha, how come one stage is legal here and one stage is not legal there? Where it points to one issue. It points to the fact that there's no one unified rule set. So if we can't even agree on what stages we're playing on, how could we possibly agree on, okay, attendees need to be able to do this, they need to be this age, they need to have this separation, So it points to the lack of regulation and uniformity across the scene. And I think that now more than ever, it's apparent that this is needed. But I want your guys' thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, I'll go first. Yeah, I mean, going to the Leffen quote, I mean, that's just 100% true. Like, obviously it sucks to, like, learn about these things, to find out that these people you might have looked up to or called friends even were at worst bad, or at best bad people, and at worst just like monsters straight up. That's really jarring. But obviously, I mean, it's nothing compared to, like, what the victims have been going through.
Absolutely.
For some of these cases, these people have been doing this for years and years. It's not just like this happened like a couple weeks ago and that's why it's coming out. It's like the victims who have been dealing with this it's just changed their life forever. And it's like, it's not something that the main issue right now I have from, like, my own psyche is that, like, even if we like, are able to, like, get these people, like, removed from the scene and maybe punished even, like, it's not like that, like, removes the trauma from the victims.
Right.
And that's something that just, like, makes me really sad, because it's like, reading this TwitLonger is nothing compared to, like, actually living through it. But it's really good that all these things are coming to light, because obviously these people have no place in our community, and it sparking this discussion is important, because it makes the scene hopefully safer in the future. At the very least, people will be more aware of this stuff. You would kind of hope, like I said, the whole idea that, like, Smash was this, like, place where as long as you played it, you were fine in the community, and, like, that's just not true. Like, you have to be a good person also. Like, I don't care. Like, I don't, if you're a predator and you play Smash, I'm not gonna be your friend, I'm not gonna and sorry, there's, like, I'm jumping all over the place, but there's a lot to be said with, like, removing idolization of top players. Like, just because someone is good or makes good content on YouTube or their stream or something has no bearing on their actual character as, like, a human being. And unfortunately, when someone's popular, you just, like, see them a lot, and you kind of think you're friends, or maybe you think they're good people, and you have no real basis for that. And so there's just a lot of power that can be abused. And ideally, it wouldn't be like that at all, but because it is, we kind of have to take steps to remove that. But sorry, I kind of felt like I started one place and then ended, and I don't really remember what you were saying.
No, that's fine. On the topic of idolizing top players, I don't disagree with you in any capacity. I just wonder how feasible it is. Like, in every sport, in every competition, there's always going to be that one name that you know, whether it's basketball or soccer or volleyball. There's going to be some name that you know that you cling on to. And this is prompting me to think on the spot, but I feel like these people have very limited fan interactions, right? Like they're on the court, they'll sign some things, they'll give a high five, and they'll separate themselves from the fans. So maybe that could be a possibility. And I know that, so to speak, VIP rooms are controversial among some, I guess, non-VIPs, right? And but I think that something like that could actually potentially be a positive in a situation like this. Like it's not to limit the experience of the top players, but rather give them the space that they need to practice, right? That's what the VIP rooms are.
I would say
Go ahead, Derek.
that is like more conservative approach though, because I would say if you look at like other esports, if you look at like Street Fighter and other like communities, right? Like obviously you can make the argument like, okay, everyone in Street Fighter's like in their 40s, so like like whatever, it doesn't matter. But but like, I think it is possible to still have an environment that without going that crazy, right? Because I feel like if we go that extreme, right? Let's say like Evan is like becomes like a top player, right? That means that I can't go to like he can't come to the tournament with his friends and like hang out with his friends or like new friends, just because he's a top player. If anything, it's like the opposite of what a community is, right?
You're right on that point. And one thought I had is that, typically when you are a prominent member in the scene, you join a team, right? Or an organization. I think that maybe organizations can come in and play this role in educating the players that they sign on, and saying, okay, well, now you're with an organization, you're going to be getting more publicity. It's official. So you need to remember these standards that, hey, these people are your friends, these people are your fans. You need to be careful with how you interact, even if they're above age. Just because you're 22 and someone else is 21 doesn't mean that the power dynamic is suddenly disappeared. You need to be conscientious of what's going on. So I think maybe that orgs can step in,
I would,
and of course
100% agree.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. It's like you go to a regular job and you have to deal like your sexual harassment training. It's just like
definitely
something that's expected that you have to do. I would say like having a training that talks about you being in this position and abusing your power. Like sex morality kind of thing.
Yeah,
I would say
and
that's
to be
actually
clear, I don't know. Do they do that? I don't know. I don't know if they do that or not.
It feels like something that
They
should
do?
be very standard. Like if you're an organization and your player does that type of shit, your organization could be fucked. You know what I mean? So
Sure.
I feel like any professional organization is probably already doing that.
You would hope.
Oh, you think in response they're thinking about doing that,
Oh, no,
or
no,
you think they've been doing this?
I think that any professional organization has probably been doing that already. Maybe the emphasis wasn't as strong, but now that in light of all the stuff that's been happening, maybe they'll push it onto their players even more. But I would like to assume that that type of talk has already happened.
So before you go, Griffin, let me ask you: do you think it's more of a before it was written in the contract and now it's going to be communicated clearly type of situation, or do you think it's different?
I would like to think that not only was it in the contract, but it was probably communicated pretty well. But like now they're really just gonna be like sit down, like, hey, serious talk type of thing. Like, I want to assume that organizations probably talk to their players like, hey, obviously don't do sexual like assault, don't commit sexual assault, don't do stupid shit. We pay
also,
you.
it's like esports, which is like pretty new, like
Sure.
The thing is, I would like to assume that. I feel like realistically, even when you go to like your companies, like obviously this is like a different point of view, right? But like, for example, this is kind of like a little off tangent, but I'll bring my point around. So I had like a friend who works at Honda, right? Which seems like an amazing company, right? He's like engineer at Honda,
Mhm.
and you would think that Honda have like all their shit together. And he said it was like one of the worst like jobs he's ever had. You know, he said like,
Wow.
yeah, if anyone from Honda's listening to this, I'm sorry, but this is just what I am. but yeah, Honda. He said working at Honda America was like, as an engineer, was like terrible. He said like everything was really unorganized. Everyone was like really complacent, and like when it came
Hmm.
to a lot of these like kind of and just something like that, which you think would be like standard industry procedure. From the outside, you know, you might hear like this company's really big. That's why I'm a little. I guess I actually don't know. I don't think any. Maybe Griffin might know most, but yeah, I have no clue how I guess, um, organized these actually might be when it comes to having
Sure.
the discussions and things.
Yeah,
I'm a
but
little more skeptical. I know Kevin's more hopeful, but I'm a little more skeptical.
but the
Yeah.
difference is that for Honda, the brand isn't made. I mean, the brand isn't the people; it's the car. You know, that's what makes
That's a good point.
it's the players that make the brand. And so if
That's
you're
true.
if what's being displayed is a person and not a car, you know, it should have
Sure,
more
yeah.
emphasis on this type of like the type of no misconduct type of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Interpersonal relations.
Yeah.
That's a good
Griffin
point.
was
That's
trying to
good
get a
point.
point out earlier. I think he still is.
Yeah,
Go for it.
I would just say you have very high hopes for something. I haven't seen the contracts of like CLG or like TSM or whatever, but I've seen a lot of contracts from like mid-level orgs, people that have reached out to me as a player, or like contracts that I've read over from like other players. And there's no mention of anything like that. I think, like I said, I would hope that the CLGs, TSMs, 100 Thieves, whatever, like the legitimate whatever things have that, but honestly, I highly doubt it. I work an office job like 9 to 5, you know, and we have quarterly like sexual harassment trainings, and I work at a bank, so we also have like financial information, like client confidentiality training, stuff like that. I think that stuff is really important at the very least, for two reasons. One, obviously, hopefully by educating these players and these people, like they're less likely to commit these things. But two, arguably more importantly, in terms of like functionality, is you can have them, like let's say you go to CLG and you're like, okay, all these CLG players have oh, Derek's gone.
It's okay. He'll
Okay.
find his way back.
So let's say it basically it's like signing a contract once you have your players actually fill out this like sexual harassment training or whatever. Because now what you can do is you can point to this and you can say, okay, there's your signature on the dotted line, yet you've done something. So we have very clear grounds to not only remove you from the team, but maybe, you know, reach out to like the community at large. Because one of the issues, like you guys, like we've been talking about, is Smash is very grassroots. There's no like overarching organization that does all these things. There is a code of conduct panel that has some of its own issues as well. Obviously, it's doing great work, but even that doesn't speak for the whole scene, right? But by having something that holds these players accountable, it actually gives us precedent to then reprimand them. You know, maybe suspend them for a couple months or years, maybe remove them entirely, maybe pursue the authorities. That's a whole other issue. Police are really bad at dealing with sexual assault and rape and stuff, especially when it's several years ago. The police are they have their own share of issues, as we've seen in have been brought forth the current light. But basically, forcing your players to do that is very good, because not only does it educate them, but also it holds them accountable. Like now we have a clear precedent. Okay, you signed this thing. Now we can actually, you know, because what a lot of people have been saying is like, oh, well, I didn't really know it was that big of a deal, or like that's kind of what the community is like. Why is it weird that I'm drinking at a Smash Fest with kids who are 16? Like that's just kind of what it's like. But if you actually have them read over documentation that shows that leads to higher cases of assault, and you know, amongst tons of other information, and then you have them like sign or prove that they've gone through this training, now you can be like, okay, well, you're an idiot, like we can remove you now. Without any sort of pushback from the player, because there's clearly like, you signed this, what are you doing?
And you know what? I do want to address the issue of pushback, and then furthermore solutions. But for now, I wanted to give you guys a quick break. Right now, Derek's having some trouble connecting as well. So it's a good time for a break anyways. We can take 5, grab some water, use the restroom, freshen up, stretch, whatever it is. And we'll be back to continue our discussion. Thanks for tuning in. We'll be right back. All right, everyone. Thank you for being patient. I wanted to mention, if I haven't before, that half of all donations are going to RAIN. This is an organization that helps educate about all sorts of sexual misconduct. !RAIN if you want to learn more about it. Feel free to donate to them yourselves as well. Yeah, that's all I really wanted to say before we continue our conversation. I wanted to bring to light something that has recently developed, and I honestly think should be more publicized. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but from my understanding, there was a clip, a 1-minute clip from Anti, one of the alleged, pedophiles, and he said in this clip that he has a group chat with a lot of other people who have allegations against them. And he insinuated that, he feels that this is sort of quote unquote planned, and this was a plot, and this was like targeting, right? This not only shows lack of growth, but it's almost the opposite. It's like they're not holding themselves accountable. They're not willing to learn from this and grow from this. And what do you do when you're dealt with a situation like that? And obviously, they still have somewhat of a platform. They still have tens of thousands, in some cases, hundreds of thousands of followers. And there will be some people who believe them. What are we to do as allies? That's kind of a question I had for you guys, and I wonder what you guys think about that.
Well,
not an easy question to answer.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully you can attempt to deplatform them. So in the case of Smash specifically, it's kind of like one of the gifts, but also curses of us being grassroots, and we're not a courtroom. So we can't actually ourselves send these people to jail, even if they deserve it. And I mentioned a little bit earlier, like even if you were to take a lot of these things to court or through the police system, these things sometimes aren't taken seriously, or it's hard to like prove stuff. Like some of these cases, you just don't have physical proof of like some of these things. But so that's unfortunate, and that we can't give them very, very, very as harsh of a punishment as we want to give them. But the nice thing about it is we can do what we can. We don't have to go through a court to get 100% physical evidence of fingerprints of stuff like that. We can just say, okay, you're clearly a danger to our community. We can remove you from tournaments. You're never allowed to go to a tournament.
So banning, yeah.
Right. And we can do that without needing some sort of like burden on ourselves. Like we can like obviously look through all the allegations, look through statements, whatever, do our due diligence. But we have the power to, over our own community, because we're grassroots, to then go, okay, Anti, you're very clearly not welcome at a tournaments anymore. Like, and unfortunately, I don't know if we can do anything else. We can reach out to Twitch and we can send like reports and stuff, but they might have their own internal presence. So like my main issue is that once we remove these people from Smash, if they have a big enough fan base, they can just go to a different.
That's what I'm saying.
Go to a different community and either be a predator there, or at the very least still profit. Like if we're looking at Zero's case, like if Zero lies down or goes offline for like 6 months and then comes back and just posts YouTube videos and just makes money off YouTube still, like I don't know, he could just do that.
Which we have strong evidence is what a lot of people like him are trying to do. Like, oh, I'm banning myself from Smash in all future tournaments. It's like, okay, no kidding, you haven't participated.
Right, yeah, that guy, yeah. So, in Zero's case, he hasn't been going, but like, that's a good question. Hopefully, I don't know. Maybe we could attempt to reach out to something like Twitch or YouTube, but they have their internal processes. Like a lot of Smash people work at Twitch. Like I know people who work there, but they're not on the like whatever team you would call that, to like who's in charge of like banning people, like safety team, whatever. I don't know. We can maybe that's an avenue. Maybe we can reach out to those organizations, try and deplatform them in that sense. Maybe.
Yeah. And on the topic of deplatforming, as a concept, I'm never a fan of reactionary deplatforming. To me, it never seemed like, it seemed like a form of censorship. But when you bring it up in a case such as this, it does. It's like a moral gray area. It's like it's a multifaceted issue, and it's
Yeah,
tough
it's just
to
canceling
point.
someone.
Yeah.
Canceling, right, and it's not always easy to point at solutions. And one idea that I've always been a fan of is listening to when people offer solutions rather than just saying, "Oh, this won't work because," and not offering anything in return. So I think that when you say it's an avenue to consider, that's absolutely what it is. And it's, obviously it's not in our hands. We have the power to bring it to Twitch, YouTube, Facebook Gaming's attention, and they will do with it what they will. They have their own internal teams, as you said. And I think so. Then I think we can, rather than saying we can deplatform them, is to say we can reach out to their platforms and inform them of what's going on, right? So like presenting what little evidence we do have.
Yeah.
And maybe the numbers will speak, right? Maybe petitions, right? I've seen petitions. I actually don't know what websites have petitions, but like for the White House, there are White House petitions, but I don't know how you would start a petition for something like this. But the point is, I think numbers speak when evidence for, let's say, a flawed system like the police
Right.
can't exist. You have numbers and you have voices, and maybe that can be a potential avenue to
So
changing that particular
so what I
situation.
want to
Go ahead, Derek.
talk about here is I'm gonna play devil's advocate here, right? So let's assume that there is someone being targeted or whatever, right? To try and be canceled, right? I don't think, to be honest, I mean this kind of our friend Peter, we kind of had a good discussion about this, and he actually brought up some good
Sure.
points. The thing is, I don't think it's in our place to decide someone should be canceled or not, because like Griffin said, we're not a court system, and the thing is, in a lot of these cases, there is no evidence, and victim like just left with that empty feeling, like I want justice to be brought, but there's like there's no evidence, I can't take it to court or whatever, right? And but at the same time, there are people who might be quote unquote being framed. Like it's not within the realm of impossibility. I think what our job here is number one priority is just make sure that the victims have space to speak and like comfortably, like
Yeah.
I think that's the number one thing. Don't pretty much not don't create an environment where they feel shamed or anything, right? And then number two, create an environment that prevents or limits going forward, like interaction between um, you know adults and minors and
Sure.
kind of things. Because I think when we talk about it's a much more difficult process to talk about uh, people right now, right? Like how do we bring justice to the people who have committed crimes but don't have evidence against them right now, right? But I think in those cases we have very limited power. All things considered, right? All we can really do is kind of move forward and create an environment where victims feel comfortable coming out if they want to. Um, listen to all the testimonies, and um, st- community can make a choice at that point, right? Um, I think that there are definitely going to be people. There might be some people affected by this in a bad way, right? Like maybe victims won't get justice because there's not enough evidence or whatever. But obviously that's not the Smash community's burden, right? That's up to the courts.
Okay.
But what we can do is support them,
Okay.
like the sidelines, like on Twitter or whatever, right? Like, and then on the other side of the fence, where someone's being targeted and being canceled or whatever, like they didn't do anything. Um, it's just unfortunate, to be honest, but I don't really know how else to put it. Like, the fact that there's so many people going against you right now. Like, you know what I'm saying? It's probably true. You know what I'm saying? Although we can't really prove it, but I think as a Smash community, I think it's kind of a difficult decision to make whether we ban them or not. Even, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you just have to realize that like false accusations are like a very, very minute
Yeah.
percentage.
But I think but I also think that we should create the most comfortable environment. That's the number one thing, right? So I think even if these allegations are false, what is true is that these many people who feel uncomfortable with you being around. And that's
I hadn't thought of it like that. That's interesting. I don't know if it merits being canceled. I see it as a necessary evil, that sort of false accusation. What's the alternative is like a classic rebuttal, right? It's like, well, okay, you don't want false accusations. Well, what do you want? It's
Yeah,
like,
I mean,
there's no perfect system. There's no omniscient God who views everything and knows the absolute truth. So you just have to accept that this can happen. What were you saying, Griffin?
Oh, I agree. I think all we can do moving forward is just make sure Capcom Cup rules for kids, get your parents there. Like,
Sure.
it's unfortunate because a big part of the Smash community are like teenagers,
Yeah.
without a doubt, But hey, it's something that needs to be done.
Yeah.
Plus, giving victims a platform to speak and not aiming them for trying to say what they feel like they need to say, because it's incredibly hard for them to even speak up in the first place, right? So
yeah, I think I just want to say I think there's like a weird like unwillingness, at least in the past, to really put out actual repercussions for these top players or whatever who do this. Like, for some reason, we feel really like, oh man, we don't want to ban this guy for playing Smash for a year. That seems so harsh. It's like, that's his career, that's his hobby. What if that were me? What if I were banned for a year? But it's like you really have to realize when when you are refusing to ban or give repercussions to these people who do sexual assault or rape or harassment or whatever, you are effectively then banning the victim, because the victim is not going to want to exist in a space where, especially if it's local, if you have an instance where your top player does something and you're at that local, like
don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that we shouldn't ban them. We should absolutely ban them. I'm just saying that in cases where there is limited evidence, it's like obviously in like the Senpai, the Nairo, like all those like big cases where they basically confessed, right? Like absolutely, right? I would say, but I'm just saying we need to be careful in terms of like there will inevitably be someone who is unfortunately caught up in that crossfire that is in like Mewtwo King, right? That's like one example, right? The cancel Mewtwo King thing, like, come on, guys.
Yeah. Well, I would say that's just an example of like when there is a false allegation, like you can defend yourself, like clearly, like in all of these cases, like man, I lost my train of thought, but
that's fine. You were saying that. Yeah.
Sorry about that.
I'll try to spin off of that. You were saying that if there is limited evidence, there are ways to defend yourself. And you know what? I think that I wanted to point to people who were in the gray area, who maybe they said, oh crap, I did something that was sort of sketch in the past. I don't know if I'm going to get canceled for it. It's like, what can you do at that point? Well, I would have some suggestions to people like that. It's like, first of all, like, educate yourself. Don't just make a donation to Rain, all right? Fine. Anybody can send $50, $100, $1,000 to Rain, but I think educating yourself, number one, is very important. And that's privately. You don't need to tweet out, hey, I took this and that education and I read this and that article. First of all, educate yourself. Second of all, I think that personally reaching out, even when you haven't been canceled, with this gray area, if you have some sort of gray area, or even something that you think is perfectly fine, but that in hindsight, after you've educated yourself, oh, I was a prominent member of the community, and this person and I had a one night stand, let's say, and it seemed fine. I haven't heard from them since, and nothing went wrong. Well, could it hurt to apologize? To say, hey, I know that I was in a position of power at this time. I'm not sure if we were both drunk. I'm not sure if we consented. I just wanted to apologize. Like, this sort of accountability for yourself. It shows maturity, and it shows that you're trying. And I think that uh, while that might not be a defense for somebody who has committed heinous acts in the past, that if you're quote unquote worried about getting canceled, I think that trying to do something positive can be a good first step towards that.
So something Griffin brought up earlier, but like one thing that would be really good is if Ash had a unified conduct panel.
You know what? I wanted Griffin to talk on this subject, so go on.
Yeah, like you said, it's gonna be really difficult because already one, like you said, we can't even agree on a freaking stage list like rule set for Ultimate, right? Like, and then like people are already
Yeah.
talking about banning characters all the time or whatever, right? And then have like the Gimmer like circuit that he was gonna be running, right? The championship series or
Yeah.
whatever. Then you had tournaments that aren't complying with that either. So I feel like there's so much going on there, but I would hope that there could be an impartial panel that looks at these things, and obviously not just base it on solely evidence, because like we mentioned earlier, evidence alone. If we're going off evidence alone, the victims are never going to get justice, right? No one's ever going to get banned. But I think we should have a panel that, I don't know, kind of looks at everything and decide, is this person threat or uncomfortable liability or whatever you want to call it, to the community? Is this person making people uncomfortable at these events, kind of thing? And yeah, I think that they should obviously take into account, the victims' testimonies, all these other things, and they can be the ones who can make that decision. What I'm saying.
Yeah.
Can such a thing exist? Can such a thing be implemented?
Well, I mean, we already.
I'd love to hear from Griffin.
There already does exist a. Oh, my dog might be barking. Sorry if you hear that in the background.
Don't worry about it.
But I do know what you're talking about. But the issue I'm more speaking to is how conduct panel made a decision to ban Captain Zach for 5 years, and then Gimmer just said, "Nah, fuck it. Well, at our events, he can still come after only 1 year."
Yeah.
So, what happens when there's like the discrepancy there, right? Like,
right.
Yeah. I have a lot of thoughts on that. So one thing I will say about Captain Zach's situation is that a lot of the details are not publicized about that case. I don't have them, but I know that there are a lot of things about that optically people are like, oh, that's weird. Captain Zach was raped, as a child, yet he's the one that's banned for 5 years. That doesn't make sense. And so a lot of people have that opinion, but that's just not true. Like, there are a lot of details about that case which are not publicized for a lot of reasons. One, he's a minor, and two, the general public at large has no right to information about these victims' cases.
Sure.
We do not need to lay out the entire police report and have a database where you can look at, okay, at 2:03 p.m. this thing happened. They're like, no, you don't need to see that. As long as we have a panel of people that we trust to make the decision with that information, they came to the decision that Captain Zach would be banned for 5 years. I just want to say that on that, because there's a lot of people, specifically obviously Ultimate people, who are like, I cannot believe that they think there's a disconnect between the punishment for Captain Zach and other things. And I just want to say that if you think that, just listen to what I said earlier. Like, you're definitely not thinking about it from the right perspective. Second of all, the disconnect between like the panel's decisions and the TIAs actually enforcing it, like you brought up, that's a good point. So one of the things is the panel is not actually the one, like you said, banning these people. It's the one releasing, looking at all the cases, talking to the victim, talking to the alleged abuser if they're available for talks, and going through that and making it a suggestion to all of these TOs, and it's up to the TOs to actually enforce it. And so, like you see, Gimmer made or I don't know if it's Gimmer specifically, but VGBC made a statement saying that they're not going to follow this, and it's really up to the players at that point, the top players specifically, because most of the people follow that, to look at that and go, okay, I'm not going to go to a VGBC tournament if you're not upholding the code of conduct panel's decisions. Like that's at the very least that's a power that myself as a top player has, other people have, where you can go, okay, if you're not going to listen to what this panel is saying, then I'm not going to support your tournament. Because a lot of the times, lower level players, especially like on the case of like idolization, seeing Nairo at a tournament is like a huge draw for them. 3 weeks ago, like, holy hell, Nairo's going, like, that guy's, that's sick, he's one of my favorite players, he's so good, like, I want to see there, maybe he'll sign something of mine. But if you have top players intentionally boycott these events when they're not upholding very serious bans for these players, that's sort of, there's sort of like a trickle down effect where it's like, okay, there are fewer people going, and then from a capitalist perspective, all of a sudden, VGBC rented out a ballroom for 2,000 people and only 1,000 people show up. All of a sudden they lose hella money. And then that's like, in our capitalist society, that's one of the only ways you can actually like pressure these people into being morally righteous, is showing them that it affects their bottom line at the end of the day also.
That's an amazing comparison, because Griffin's right. We live in a society that values goods and services to the nth degree. Money talks. Well, guess what? You get to choose where you spend your money as a top player, as as a Owen-2er, so to speak. So let your voice be heard in that way. So I hadn't even considered that, and I think that speaks to a lot. So I'm happy you brought that point up.
Yeah, that would be great if
Good.
because all the tournaments release their rule sets ahead of time. Definitely, I would think it would be great if like there was a paragraph at the start, like this tournament complies with the conduct committees, blah 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 blah. Right.
Yeah, there is
maybe like the Smash conduct panel can have like, how like Nintendo has a stupid like seal of approval shit on like all whatever. Like maybe they could have that, or something.
Yeah.
Like still on the rule set when you just see it, or like on the ads when you see it, you'll have that little symbol there or something like that. Like that'd be pretty cool. You just know like.
And honestly, as an attendee, I'm in a very privileged position with my status within the community, but also my age, race, gender. I'm not an underprivileged person going to these tournaments. I'm not a woman. I'm a white cis male, whatever. But I would hope that someone who's from an underprivileged like class of power would see that seal and be like, okay, well now maybe I feel safer, and now I know if something does happen, my voice will be heard legitimately, and I'll be given like a space to talk freely about something that happens. That makes a lot of sense for me to see that seal and be like, okay, like I feel more comfortable going to this tournament. And there is a list for the code of conduct panel of tournaments that do follow it. I know like Big House and like Shine and stuff like do. I'm more familiar with like the Melee side, obviously, but there is like a really long list of like all of these TOs, and that sort of gives it more legitimacy to the panel, which is nice, because now all of a sudden VGBC is the odd one out. So it's like, okay, weird, why are they doing this?
And that's weird too, because VGBC is arguably the biggest one running everything too. So I think that's where the problem starts, right?
Yeah, and also, I mean, they are MDVA, right? And isn't that where a lot of these things are happening?
Oh, how the cookie crumbles. Well, I think that could, I don't know your involvement or how well you know people in the Smash Bros. Code of Conduct, but I think that idea of a seal, I think that's an excellent like marketing decision, like on one aspect, and of course safety decision on another aspect, to say that okay, well, first of all, you guys want to make your presence known. You want to say, hey, we actually exist. Well, what better of a way? Create a seal, have tournament organizers throw it on their Shine 2020 page or whatever, and boom, you've got awareness. Hey, this tournament cares about this cause. We exist. And on top of that, you make, like you were saying, maybe POCs who don't feel as privileged and safe to come to these events to say, oh, well, you know what? This seems safer than this random weekly that I can't find much info about. This seems more regulated. This seems more organized, more professional. I think that's a very good point that you guys brought up, and I like that a lot.
Yeah,
I didn't even, once again, we're bringing up things I hadn't even thought about, and that's
yeah.
a great thing of having this discussion.
And
Go ahead, Derek.
and if we want to as well, we can like the panel could hire, professionals, whatever you want to call it, like specialists in these kind of fields, right? People who have experience dealing with victims of trauma and all these other things, right?
Oh yeah, that's actually another thing. So the panel does have some people who are professionally experienced with that, but they also, I posted it in, I think, the stream feedback channel. I think that's the only channel I can actually post messages in. But I linked, there is a list of resources of that the Code of Conduct panel put out about a week ago. And so since myself and a couple other TOs and prominent figures in SoCal have been trying to make a conduct panel for SoCal specifically, we've been using this resource a lot. It has like a lot of documentation on like educating yourself on like recognizing or determining what is actually, sexual assault. Like in your day-to-day life, especially as a man, I can speak to this, like you're not really educated on like this stuff. Like a lot of the stuff, like he was saying, like you do these things and then maybe you get educated and you introspect and you reflect on your past decisions and you're like, oh, okay, maybe I was actually in the wrong there, or maybe I was taking advantage of a power dynamic that I didn't even recognize existed prior to me being educated on that. In the most heinous examples, it doesn't matter how educated you are, you still should be reprimanded. Yeah. But there's a lot of like micro interactions where you take advantage of something without even knowing it. So there's a lot of resources in there for education on that. And then there's a lot of resources in there for creating a code of conduct panel yourself. So what is the proper way to get victims' testimony? What is the proper way to talk to the alleged abusers? How do you sort through all this information? How do you organize it like structurally and functionally and stuff like that? So you can go, I don't know, you can post the link in like Twitch chat or whatever, but so they're and a lot of those sources are professionally cited. Like they're not just like someone did just make a Google Doc randomly. Like these are from professional organizations where it's their job to create resources like this. And so that compilation of them is really useful. I haven't read through all of it. Like there's literally hundreds of pages in there. I've read through a decent amount, but at the very least, like that's a very simple thing that maybe you give those to the tournament organizers for the big tournaments, or like maybe you give that to like players, like we were talking about with that are a part of organizations. And then one of the other things that I think would be good for tournaments that do maybe have the seal of approval or whatever, or maybe one thing they need to do to earn it is to actually very publicly show that they, if something happens at a tournament, you can go to the TO or a pool captain and pull them aside and go, hey, I'm not comfortable with this player, or something happened and I want to talk to someone about it. Is there somewhere I can go? And having something like that at these larger tournaments especially would be really good. Maybe having like, I don't know, like flyers or something.
Like a tournament psychologist or something in a safe space?
Yeah, something like that. I mean, some sort of authority figure that on the spot can be there to like listen to what they have to say and like make decisions. Like, I mean, obviously TOs and pool captains are there right now, but like, I don't think if you go to a random like Evo or something, the pool captains are not like trained to like handle. Like,
I mean, let's be honest. Pool captains are volunteers. They can be average Joes. They don't,
And as a top player myself, sometimes I end up captaining my own pools. I don't mind it. I've TO'd for years and years. Pool captaining's not that hard, but like sometimes they're like, okay, we don't have someone available. Can you just run it for like 30 minutes? And I'm like, okay, yeah, sure. So, but like in those cases, I'm not that experienced with it. So if someone were to, thankfully those things haven't happened, or maybe worse, they have happened and they haven't come up to me. But if they were to come up to me and say, hey, this thing is happening, what do I do? I wouldn't have, in tournaments prior, a place to point them to. I would just go, oh, the head TO's over there. Like, can you like talk to them? But like, it would be nice if we had dedicated people to address like on the ground stuff like that. So that's another thing to consider.
No, definitely. I know that time is creeping up on you, Griffin. It's 8:02.
Yeah, I might have to leave soon. Sorry, I'm gonna check my phone and see what's happening.
No, yeah, go for it. I think that we made a lot of headway in this conversation today. I think that we all provided some unique perspective on the topic. And given that we have time pressure on one end and that we've had a great conversation thus far, I think we can leave the rest to be said in potentially a later episode or a casual talk. But I think that we've done well so far here. So in other words, we're going to be wrapping up the episode right here. Unless anybody has any final words before I let you guys plug some socials and some things you guys want to plug. Are there any last words you guys wanted to get in before we wrapped up?
I kind of want to hear more from Kevin because Kevin was quiet the whole time, or like just random thoughts.
All right, you're being called out, Kevin. You're on the spot. Last words. Boom. Go.
I don't really have too much to say in terms of like, I mean, I agree with everything that has been said. I'm just left to think about like how well we can implement all of these things, like I wonder about how, like, because with governance comes with like lack of flexibility, and I wonder how it'll affect locals. Will we only have like established locals? Like, can people no longer just like, oh, I'm starting up,
I was thinking that too
at Fremont or something like that. And
you don't have the resources to kind of that's a
like,
good point.
If you can't become established, how will the scene grow? Where a lot of the scene growth is from locals.
It's true. It's not.
That's a good point.
It's not like you're paying taxes, so the Smash. Smash Conduct can like can fly someone out or hire someone to go that weekly.
Just gets tacked on to the entry fee,
Right.
Oh man.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I think part of the despite the whole COVID thing definitely being bad, there is a silver lining in the quarantine aspect, in that we have time to. We don't need to rush to a decision. Like, there's definitely an argument to be said that making a bad decision is worse than not making a decision at all yet. So it's very convenient right now that we have time to have discussions like these, even though they maybe they're on a smaller scale, and then talk to other prominent members of the community, see what they have to say, talk to victims, and we're sort of afforded the time. One of the issues with locals actually happening, if there is a case of sexual assault or what have you, it takes time to make a decision, but in that interim, the abuser is still there. The victim still has to deal with it. Like, if something happens at a SoCal local, and there's a Twilonger, and there's all these things that we have to go through. As it stands right now, the abuser would still be going to locals while we're making our decision. Like, we can't. Prior to this, obviously now, hopefully we would have a better structure, and that's part of. Like,
I guess that would be up to the TO, right? Ultimately, be like the conduct panel is currently reviewing this candidate while this person's being reviewed. They're not welcome at their tournament.
Right. Yeah, and that's. I actually think what you're saying is very progressive. I don't think a lot of people would be down. I agree 100%, but I think what you're saying there is sort of like
because it's like the local hero, right?
Right.
It's like me and Tommy who come out every week, right? And so like a familiar face, and then they're like, "No, we can't ban Timmy and Tommy,"
Right. Well, yeah. But no, that's exactly what I would do if there was a case, and people always are like, "Well, what if that happened to you? Like, would you be okay with that?" Like, to try and like devil's advocate some sort of like man's perspective or whatever. It'd be fine. Like, look, if someone had something brought against me or something, obviously it'd be false, but that's fine. It takes time for these things to like be gone through. I would be okay stepping away for like 2 to 3 weeks from like Smash tournaments while we like figure this thing out.
That's a good point.
That's fine. Like it's okay, guys. It's fine. Like you can deal with not playing Smash for 2 weeks at this local where there's someone who genuinely feels uncomfortable with you being there. Like while like everything gets hashed out. If it does happen to be a false accusation, then it's only 2 weeks.
Yeah, the victim deserves benefit of the doubt.
Right. Exactly. That's what I'm trying to say. Like at the very least in the interim, that's something you can do, but before you come to like a more permanent decision. But yeah, that's just one of the things I wanted to say about, and it kind of makes sense that a lot of these allegations are coming to light now during quarantine, because these decisions aren't made instantly. Like if you come out against a top player, and then a week later they're supposed to commentate a national, like well, the TOs are like, well, do we drop you immediately? Like, you know, like, and arguably they should, but maybe they won't. And then all of a sudden there's some sort of controversy there. But it's kind of a double-edged sword that we're in quarantine right now. But it's good that we have the time to speak about this and make a decision with actual like thought and stuff, instead of trying to rush to do something that ends up being worse for the community.
Hopefully, we don't band-aid and we put a long-term solution.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's
I think the local, like what Kevin said, the local part will be probably the hardest thing to tackle.
And you know, I kind of like envision like a starter pack, right? Like here's your local starter pack. Like educate yourselves on this, and like teach whoever participates or volunteers that. And I hope that, you know, like we said, we can't bog down locals with the same regulations and standards that we hold majors, but we need to recognize that, like Griffin was saying earlier, we can see kernels of what happens in any sort of tournament.
Or maybe even a great thing maybe people can do is Smash GG, right? Most tournaments are like run on Smash GG. Maybe Smash GG, if you're going to TO, right? Maybe there's a long policy line that they have to read, that policy like line that they have to read that includes like the you know, make sure you adhere to these standards.
Or maybe just to start a weekly, you need training, you know? And there are holes in anything, but that's a step to take. Like there's a lot of like if you have small solutions scattered in many different places, I feel like they'll start to work. You know, if there's a training video on Smash GG, on the other hand, you enter a major, you know, maybe there's something you read as a participant, there's something you read as a top player, there's something you read as a pool captain, TO, etc. Like all of these add up. Like if you're seeing the same sort of material over and over in different places, it must amount to something.
Yeah, and we also, I think we have more power than we might think, in the sense that I'm also on the Melee SoCal PR. Obviously, we don't have tournaments right now, so we're not doing anything. But you know, we decide the power ranking for Melee SoCal, or well, I'm on a team. It's not just me. But one of the things we can do is like we can put leverage over tournaments. Like, okay, you have to do these things, otherwise your tournament does not count for PR.
Okay,
we have the power to do that. And then all of a sudden, top players don't want to go to it because, you know, they're not, or mid-level players don't want to go because they're not going to get ranked wins, and then fewer people go, so top players don't want to go because they're not going to make $100 every time they win. You know, and then that has a larger effect, and then the TO is pressured, and you know, like I said, from a capitalist perspective, if they're renting out something that costs money, they can't run in the red forever. Like there's a lot of things we can do, and that's just like a small example of pressure. Like, or you know, the ranked players can be like, okay, we're boycotting this tournament until you guys actually do something about the issues that you guys have, if you do have issues, you know, stuff like that.
They can't afford to not comply. I like that. That's smart from a business capitalist perspective, for sure. I don't mean to cut us short. I love our conversations that we're having. I'm just sort of looking out for Griffin and our other two guests here. But Griffin, how are we looking on timing? Should we wrap up?
Honestly, I do need to go, but you guys can totally. I mean, I don't want to end the whole.
So what I was gonna suggest to Derek and Kevin is, if you guys want to keep talking, I'm gonna have like dinner on stream and then do just chatting, so we could just casually talk about it rather than in podcast format. We can decide on that after we go on a break, but let's formally conclude the podcast part of it. So thank you guys for being on. I'm gonna give you each a moment to share like a final blurb / plug anything that you care about, or your socials. We'll start with you, Derek.
Nope. I'm good.
Okay, nothing at all. So be it. Griffin, anything you want to plug / share with the stream?
Yeah, I feel like it's kind of in bad taste to plug any Twitter or anything, so I'm not going to do that. But I just want to say, like, if you could post like the link that I put in Twitch chat or something.
It's in chat.
Okay,
Yeah.
Like, just at the very least, share that with your local TOs, or read it through yourself if you're anyone who goes to tournaments. You don't have to be a top player to be held accountable. At the very least, being educated means that you can recognize things and you can call your friends out, being like, okay, dude, like language is like the easiest thing to be like, okay, don't use these words that are like actually slurs. Like, okay, maybe you don't mean that harmfully.
TLDR, don't be a degen, right? Like,
yeah,
and don't let
don't
your
be a
friends
degen.
be degens either. Like,
right. Educating yourself,
Yeah.
holding people accountable, but really recognize, just because maybe you yourself haven't had these issues with the Smash scene. Like for myself, I started going to tournaments when I was 17. And, you know, I've been lucky enough as, you know, a white male, whatever, to not have to deal with these things. Not that white men don't have their own issues, but whatever. I've been lucky enough for my own experiences to not have anything happen to me personally. But just because you might be in the same issue doesn't mean that these issues don't exist within the community at large. You know, as we've seen, like you mentioned, the mega thread has like literally hundreds of allegations. Like you have to scroll.
Exclamation mark smash to see that mega thread. It's shocking.
Yeah, and I would just say listen to victims when they have things to say, and don't let your own experiences cloud what's happening. Even if you are a woman, for example, who has had no issue, maybe you're seen as perfect, or maybe you got lucky or whatever. Like that doesn't mean what your experience represents everything that other people have. Even with an individual person, there's a lot of cases of like you talk to a top player and like, wow, this person's such a nice guy. I don't believe this victim who's speaking out saying that they've done stuff to them, because I have had such good experiences with them. It's just like a lot of personal biases that I would try and educate yourself so you can introspect on sort of what's happening at large.
Check your biases. Definitely wise words. Thank you for sharing that, Griffin. And then finally, last but not least, Kevin, if there's anything you'd like to let the chat know, the stream know, the podcast know, it's time for that.
No, I'm good. I got nothing.
Alrighty. Yeah, then we'll go ahead and wrap up the podcast now. Thank you everyone for joining. It was really informative. It was a good discussion, and I hope to have you guys back in the future.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
good, sounds good.
It's a pleasure.